that is what I saw. And before I started seminary, I was very interested in just the inner church part of that I didn't see in Protestantism. And then when I got to seminary, CTS, Charles Ashton was his last semester, and it was my first semester. And he brought this Zen-like quality to my life and introduced me to a whole different side of Christianity, which really teaches that whole sense I saw the cross in a whole different way. I saw the crucifixion and Jesus' sacrifice in a whole different way. So to me, the cross is not this, hey, God through Christ did all this work. Shouldn't you feel guilty? Shouldn't you actually, God did all this for you. You need to be thankful. That's not what the cross means to me. What the cross means to me, the cross is empty for me. And I have to climb up on the cross. And I have to sacrifice. And sometimes in a daily way, I have to sit there and put my arms out and say, I'm not going to grab onto this and hold on to this. I'm going to let go. And that's what the cross means to me. That's my own sacrifice that I have to make. And to me, that's what I try to do in pastoral ministry, is awaken that sense that people can grow only if they put that work into it, only if they look inside themselves. And that's where it's awesome that you guys have teamed up with the therapy side of it, because I think that's brilliant what you're doing. Because I have such a difficult time because most of I'd say about half of my time in ministry is done one-on-one doing coffee shop counseling. And I love that, but there's just so far you can go. And you guys in your church are able to bring people in and then filter them through. And I just think what you're doing, and that's why, our church supports you and will continue to support you, because I love the concept of what you're doing, because it's exactly what I would do. If I was going to start a church, I would do exactly what you guys are doing. And to have you two teamed up, I just really think it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, one thing I was thinking of when you described the cross, there's two positions.
I was just going to say that. I think
of the cross. And if you look at the disciples logo, it's showing the other position of the cross. It's not necessarily upright, but it's in the position of being dragged.
Oh, and then
of being carried.
Nice.
This is an active way of being. So when we talk about these be attitudes, and we think about God saying be, that's an active statement of going forward, right? That's an active statement of growth and of establishment. And I feel like that is, though it is heavy, actually God is able to make that burden light.
So another thing,
that's nice.
I thought you were going a different direction. I agree with that. And I heard what you said, Peter. And one of my friends, Pastor Justin, I can't remember who he was quoting to me, but he told me about it's a different two-way approach to the cross. But it was interesting how you said you put yourself on the cross. That is part of it. If we're more in a place of privilege and we don't understand oppression as much, we do need to put ourselves on the cross to experience the pain and the suffering so that we can learn more compassion, right? But then if you're already amongst the oppressed, then you don't experience the cross like that because you've already experienced the cross like that. So you approach the cross more from, I'm not getting the quote exactly right, but the idea is if you're in the oppressor class, you should get on the cross. And if you're in the oppressed class, you should be free of the pain. And it's sort of the Beatitudes, right? It's the flipping script. If you've always been comforted, well, now it's your time to suffer. If you've always suffered, it's your time to be comforted. And so, I think of the cross in that way, like how we approach it and learn from it. I think that the oppression versus oppressed matters in that case.
It's so difficult to preach that, because when you preach it and you're being pastoral, you automatically, when you say that, you automatically are being prophetic, especially in our society that is so deeply embedded in the true religion of our society, which is capitalism.
Yeah.
And I think that when we really look at it, and it's this Darwinian type of like,
Social
get
dark.
out there and, you know, this macho, this testosterone driven, because, you know, as a guy, I'm around other pastors who are like different body types than I am, and I'm a, you know, they're just so assertive, and they're just so let's just take over. And I approach ministry from such a different aspect. I don't approach it from that Darwinian, the survival of the fittest kind of thing. I don't see Christ in any of that. And, you know, and really until we really speak the truth in terms of where our true religion is in our society, which is economic driven, until we really address that, we really can't say a whole lot that's going to get people's attention, because really the only thing that gets people's attention right now is when they lose money.
That's true. That's why I say when they put on the money in God We Trust in the 50s, that's accurate. But they're just not saying who God is. It's actually money.
Yeah.
In God, money we trust. Because if really in God we trust, that wouldn't have to be on the money, right? Because it's not about the dollars, but the pursuit of money is the God of this country. And so, yeah, that's
that's a whole nother topic.
Hey, that is the core though. That's where the situation lives. And, you know, when I think about our conversation the other day at Bible study, I can view, you know, that the activity in the garden story as individualism, as a decision, you know, to satisfy self outside of God. I look at the creation story, or the story of Lucifer being cast down for attempting to take the throne of God, and, you know, third of the angels being cast down with him. You know, as individualism, capitalism, and colonism. Right. So this spirit is actually a Luciferian spirit, because it breaks the body of Christ by breaking relationships between people. And so we've wrapped that up into our core value of winning, being the best, being the brightest, being the smartest, being the greatest country ever. And because we're practicing idolatry, basically, we're stuck, because now they're saying, well, we have to make America great again, which means we're out of the present, back into the past, focusing on something that's dead.
Yeah.
So our country is dying as a result.
Yeah. Yeah, and at the root of all that is fear. And I just feel like that's one of the things that I struggle with is we're living through times right now that no one living has ever gone through. And I'm used to having mentors in my life. I don't know about you all, but I don't have them anymore.
I don't.
Yeah, I got a couple.
Oh.
Yeah, my mentors have passed away, and it's you know, I have to be the adult in the room now. You know, and you sit here, and you're like, all right, this is a big moment. We have to be prophetic and pastoral at the same time in a very stressful situation. And one of the things that I think was, you know, you talk about a Luciferian spirit. Whenever there's a spirit of fear, God is absent.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I feel like I really work hard at making sure that I'm prayed up in terms of my meditation, because if I go through my day and I have fear about the pandemic or economics or whatever, if I have any fear involved, I'm not able to counsel folks. I'm not able to do hospital calls. I'm not able to do anything really. let alone be a good dad, or be a good husband or whatever. That spirit of fear is very Luciferian. I mean, it really is. And the way it's Luciferian, I kind of look at it from I'm a really big fan of Dostoevsky. This whole idea that there are two aspects of Satan, and it's this isolation in one hand, and then it moves into a destruction. So the first aspect of what Lucifer does in our life is isolates us, which is exactly what you were saying. It breaks us off from relationships, and that's what this pandemic has done. Is it's broken us off from relationships, face to face, and we have to do them through technology now. And that isolation is leading to this destruction. And I think you're exactly right. And we have to struggle as churches and as pastors of these churches. How do we reconnect? How do we reconnect people? And you guys at your church are doing a great job with Zoom. I haven't done a whole lot of that with my church, but I've done a lot of phone calling and a lot of contacting, and anymore I've done a lot of coffees here recently since we've gotten out. But reconnecting, I just think that is essential.
I kind of see the isolation that Corona has brought as sort of like a manifestation of the loneliness that was already there.
Yes.
Because what he was saying about individualism, like that is, and the competition that comes with that, right, is so we have a scarcity model. There's only so many resources in the world. If I don't compete with all of you, then we go back to your fear thing. I fear that I will have nothing. But when we're always competing with each other, we basically make sure that we leave everybody behind because of the scarcity model. Whereas if we just work together, everybody could have enough. But see, that's choosing a spirit of love and vulnerability and the willingness to put yourself out there, knowing that someone could hurt you. And it's much easier to live in fear, like everybody's going to steal from me, everybody's untrustworthy, everybody's bad, and there's not enough to share. So if I share, then I'm going to work, and then some lazy person is going to take advantage of me. And that goes back to the individual cultural American dream messaging, which is if you work hard and bootstrap yourself up, you can succeed.
Take your advantages.
Never mind that some people are underneath the boot. So if you pull up on the bootstraps, you're just pulling up into the bottom of the shoe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's that myth has been debunked over and over again. But so I was talking to somebody about racism, and they were saying, white people in particular are afraid of addressing racism because how badly we've treated people. We think that all the other groups, they are like us, and that if we let up control and admit that we did bad things and we have to do something different, that those people are then going to oppress us. Like vengeance is what's going to happen. But that's not true, because just because we did it, we're projecting our fear and our reactions onto groups of people who are just wanting to be equal, just wanting to have the ability to care for their families. And if they got equality, the first thing on the top of their list would not be to destroy all white people. That's a white person projection because we've destroyed so many people. And in a way, I think we have that projection because we know we would deserve it.
And empire uses that as an excuse to suppress.
Absolutely.
Like when we talk about Augustine handing the church over on a silver platter because we're all, from semen.
From sinful semen.
So, so this psychology, this Luciferian mindset has a way of setting conditions so that it can therefore come in with solutions.
Well, like empire creates the problem and then, we'll fix it by doing this.
Because that takes
take the power.
That takes organic systems out, and it takes God out when we have the answer already before we present the problem.
Right.
And you watch some of our Gnostic videos, I think.
Awesome.
And so part of the reason why I chose to study the Gnostic texts and early Christianity is because I didn't realize how connected to empire Christianity had become until I learned that about the early church story in the first few hundred years. So the Orthodox Church, even before Constantine took over, they were still trying to establish their power structure. You know, like it's the bishop that talks to God, which talks to the people, and it's a male structure, right? It's a patriarchal structure that they created. And then, you know, I was already questioning that, like, as opposed to Gnostics, who are more about secret knowledge, which I interpret to be secret only in that you just have to look for it. It's not like exclusive to just certain people. It's just you have to have the personality and the will to look for deeper spiritual truths. So I love that the Gnostics kind of said to the Orthodox Church, y'all are just feeding baby food. Mm-hmm. You know, you're feeding like a pat message that basically unifies the masses, and you have control now, and all the masses behave accordingly, and it's all tidy. And whereas the Gnostics are like, well, no, because there is the communal responsibility, but there's also the individual journey, and those who have the ears to hear and the eyes to see, to ask the questions, can then like share that knowledge with other people and help everybody wake up spiritually. Nice. But when Augustine took the original, the creation story and made it about original sin and made us all evil, he actually went against God, because God in the creation story said it is good. So just because Adam made a different choice and Eve made a different choice, God didn't say they were bad. God just said, okay, well, now you got to go live with the consequences of your choice, because that's right. Free will. Like, with freedom comes responsibility. So if you choose this, well, these are the things that go along with that choice. But to say that we're pure evil, and the fact that Augustine did it right when Constantine converted, Augustine knew that if we're all evil, we have to be looked after. And that's a power structure. And so that's what he was saying. I said in the Bible study, I said, so Augustine just said, oh, this religion of freedom that God gave us, to where we're created to have free will, where Jesus gave us grace, all of this stuff, scrap all that. You're evil. You need the emperor or the pope or whoever to like mediate between you and God, because you're just a hopeless cause.
And for me, that was a marriage between church and state that's made in hell, basically. It was just an incestuous type of agreement that says, hey, if you deliver your religion to us, into our power structure, then we will maintain you as the church. You will always be the church of state. And here we are.
Well, and then Bonhoeffer struggled with that with the Nazi church. And here we are today struggling with the Trump church.
Yeah. We are struggling. I mean, that whole discussion about Constantine is a mixed bag. I mean, it really is. And I'm really have been keenly interested in all the Orthodox, with my connection with Charles Ashen in the Serbian Orthodox Church, but just this whole idea that there's a lost inner church, inner teachings out there over and above you know, what Augustine was teaching, because I'm not a big fan of Augustine at all. And really, the things that got me started when I was in undergrad was studying Elaine Pagel's book on Gnostics, and I love that. And just this whole idea that there's inner knowledge there for us that's not exclusive, but it's there, like you said. Because esotericism, the word esoteric doesn't mean hidden; it just means inner. Right. So it's not about we're keeping things from you, but there in these old cathedrals, you know, there are threshold guardians, these monsters at the doors for a reason. Those in terms of mythology, I'm a big Joseph Campbell fan, and so in terms of mythology, the reason they have those mythologically is to ward you off, because this is dangerous territory when you really start a spiritual journey. And you in a Jungian sense, you have to let self be depleted to such a point where you have to sacrifice on the cross that self, that old self, that there's so much within the spiritual journey that I love about doing Christian ministry, because you get to see people go through these processes of spiritual development, and it really is an intricate science. And one of the aspects of the early church that I love, this particularly the Cappadocian fathers, is this whole individual journey that I have found within the teachings of the early church, over and above the Augustinian stuff. Because when Constantine gets his revelation at the Battle of Milvian Bridge and says, "Hey, let's put the symbol on the shields of all the soldiers," and he wins this three-way battle.
Yeah.
Well, and then everyone, can you imagine what that would have been like to have everyone suddenly Christian and have so many fake people join the church?
What could
Do you want to talk? I wonder what that would look like. And so the mystics within the early, within the fourth or the fifth century there really struggled, because everyone was Christian, and it diluted the whole thing. It just it didn't mean anything. So you had people going to the deserts in Syria, and in Turkey. You had these guys that were just leaving these towns because they just wanted to get away from all this fakeness. And that's kind of where I feel like I'm at. It's just there's so much fakeness, and there's going to be a reckoning. There's going to be a reckoning here.
Yep.
It's not going to be pretty in terms of the church and how fake it's been, and how scared and how fearful it's been.
Right.
Because that's what we've seen the last 4 years.
I would say we've seen it longer than that, but it's coming to a head in the last 4 years.
And it starts with Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
And Barry Goldwater, maybe, really.
Yeah.
Maybe even Goldwater, because that's really when the Republicans realized in '64 that, hey, there's a bunch of, we can tap into this as identity politics. But yeah, there's going to be a huge reckoning. But there still, that the thing that I hold on to is just this spiritual journey that we're called to teach, and to not guilt people in this ridiculous original sin argument.
Right.
And allow people to grow we don't need any more guilt.
Yeah, we don't. And guilt isn't from God.
I think that's the way that institutions purpose to hold their ground.
Mm-hmm.
Is by keeping us in the baby food stage, by keeping us doing the same liturgical march every calendar year. And so having these cultural norms of decency that include not talking about deep,
hard stuff,
deep situations, not talking about politics, not talking about religion, just all the key things that are really core to being human. We sort of dance around that stuff in a polite way, and we don't really touch it. And that behavior right there is insurance for institutions, because we won't go deep with each other. We won't have intimacy with each other, because it's not PC. It's not what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, for us, like when we named our statement of values, we put all kinds of stuff in there to kind of help people understand that that's how we're navigating as a church. Because the comfort thing, again, the comfort and the fear-based motivations are devastating. That causes all the lying and manipulation and all of the relational damage, where so much so that now we become, like I mentioned earlier, the lack of emotional intelligence. I've actually had pastors like talk about, well, you can't work with people when they're emotional because, the rational sensibilities don't work anymore. So here's what I said to that. I said, everything is not about being rational and intellectual. That's a particular white man / white woman to a degree culture, right? Because what I said earlier, men are not socialized to deal with and recognize and accept that they have emotions and that emotional intelligence matters. So what I had to say in response was, well, no, you can have a conversation that when you're emotional. Yes, there is the fight, flight, amygdala response. If you're really stressed out and triggered, yes, your rational ability to formulate words kind of go by the wayside. You can become repetitive and it's harder to get the words out. However, when you can name those emotions as you're going through them, and we were talking about before, sit with them, then you get through them and you can increase your emotional intelligence together, and your relational vulnerability is developed, and your ability to stand with someone through hard truths. Your attachment is developed, excuse me. So I let him know, I'm like, basically, no, everything is not about rational and intellectual. And I named that, if you feel bad, it is hard to communicate. However, you can still do it by naming, oh, you know what? I feel it in my throat. And I remember now that when I get this feeling in my throat, it means I want to cry. I feel sad. Or if I get this tightness in my chest, oh, let me take a deep breath. Oh, I know what that is. That's anxiety or fear. Or, oh, my stomach is feeling queasy. So what is that? Oh, that's nervousness. That's fear. Being able to name it, you don't have to avoid it. And so that's where I think when we bring that back to the pastoral and the prophetic, I feel like you can't take away the prophetic from the pastoral, because the biggest part of prophetic ministry is telling the truth, is naming what the problem is so that we can go through the problem and heal from the problem and learn from the problem and get to the solution and get to the healing. But the prophetic is the honesty and the facing and the dealing with the hard stuff so that you can be healed. So that to me is why I thought it was an interesting question to bring up, because I don't see how you can take the prophetic away from the pastoral and be genuine,
I like how you put that. I think that's really a good way to see that. You really cannot separate them. You really can't. I like that.
But if you notice how institutional church has through time been seen as trying to, or being against the prophet.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So what then is the institutional church if the prophet is showing up with truth?
Mm-hmm.
And then we might have a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Right. Yeah, it is a real struggle, because you do risk. You risk discomfort, you risk financial insecurity. There's, like we had said before, there's just all kinds of things there. And one thing I talked about yesterday in my sermon was, during the Civil War, the some of the loudest voices were white male preachers in the pulpits in the North. They were the ones, and I said that was I didn't couch it in that language, but that's a prophetic voice that, without that voice, it's not where it's at in 1861. So, yeah, I mean, this has been a good discussion, because it really is. I like the idea that you really cannot separate the two. And I think, because you get comfortable. I've been so comfortable in just doing that default setting. I'm a pastor, and I'm just here to help people through funerals and weddings and blah, blah, all these things. And then you get to a time, and it really is a privilege to be in a time like this that we're in. I really do feel kind of excited to some extent, because we're actually in such turbulent times that this is stuff that you and I, the three of us have just read about stuff from the 60s. And you've got people in modern culture that are realizing that wow, what was this? Who was this Martin Luther King Jr. and who was Malcolm X? And these these ideas that there really is this is a perennial struggle that we're able to go through. And we didn't have this in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, but man, we got it now. And it is a challenge, but it at the same time, it's a privilege.
And I also pose this in a racial discussion. They were talking about, in times of change, particularly the white church, right? The white church has been comfortable. We've been doing the same old thing. We've not been checked. We've not been checked about how we've interacted with culture and all the empire and all the stuff we've been talking about, right? And so, in conversation, they're like, well, we have to help people deal with their loss. And in that context, I understood that to be like their loss of privilege, their loss of understanding of the world, their loss of like all the stuff they thought they knew. And I agree with that. However, I also added, what about the time of gain? Think about what we gain, particularly as white people, if we expand and notice and learn from all of the beauty of other people's views.
Absolutely.
Like when we start to listen to feminists and mujeristas and womanists, womanist feminists, mujeristas, Latin American liberation theology, James Cone, James Baldwin, when we read fiction like Octavia Butler and Alice Walker and Maya Angelou, like Miguel de la Torre, there's so many different ways of thinking that we have defined white culture as normal, but it's only normal for white people, and it's only been normalized because of white supremacy, right? And so we act like all of these other voices are not that important. But think about what we gain. We gain new knowledge, new insights, new skills and tools to help us on our journey, because who better to understand how to navigate through oppression than the groups of people who have been navigating through oppression for hundreds of years. We don't need white male saviors to help us through oppression. We need people who have been through oppression for real, to actually say, okay, here's how this developed my faith. This is how it developed my spiritual journey, my emotional journey. And we can learn from what they've written, what they've been telling us. And just by listening, we actually gain so much when we let go of control and power. Because we realize the world is much bigger than what we thought.
So it's actually a spiritual attack when a person is given privilege and power outside of context. So when you empower your children to decide what time we're going to bed and what we're going to eat for dinner and where we're going to go for vacation and all this stuff, it seems quite innocent. But if you think about it, what you're doing is empowering an individual who does not have the experience and the context to deliver a decision that is in concert with God.
Nice.
And in agreement with the Spirit. And so we start to follow after all kinds of appetites, which that's also a spiritual attack. So we have to be on guard, even in our sleep. When dreams come to us, we have to have that much armor on to say, no, I know that's not you, God.
Yeah, that's part of the
contrary.
The beauty of for me as meditation has been an amazing tool for me, spiritual tool, to be able to discern and be able to divide up some of the things that are my thoughts and not my thoughts.
Right.
I think that part of discernment is so important. it's vital to be able to sit here and say, no, to block thoughts and to be able to say, you know what, I'm not going to daydream about that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to fantasize about that. I'm not going to think of those thoughts. Where did that thought? I sometimes I have thought, like, where did that come from? You know, and I'm going to say no. And to keep on track spiritually, you have to. To me, Christianity is a lot more psychological than it is moralistic religion. I think Christianity is very, very. I think it's based in the psyche, and it's not based in moralism. And when I get
more Gnostic, and that's where it's more Gnostic. You
absolutely
know, understand our relationship to things better.
Yeah, that's essential for me, and that's what Christianity. When I got that in my head in terms of, hey, this is where Christianity is really based. It's not based in emotion, or it's not based in moralism. It's based in the psyche. It's based in my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why Paul talks about the helmet of salvation, isn't it? I mean, the helmet of salvation. Salvation's the big thing, and he puts the helmet on that, the head.
When I think about the truth shall set you free, and I think about our oppression that we have in this country based on white supremacy and patriarchy, I think about Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu's quote about I can't get it right now, but it's basically like, until everyone is free, no one is free.
Yeah.
But basically he's naming that the oppressors are not free either. And I think about that, I think about it in terms from a white woman privilege, but I also think about it in terms of white male privilege, especially in the church, because the church is very concerned with having white male pastors, particularly with young kids and families and all of that kind of stuff. I've had conversations with multiple male pastors too, is what they do is they give leadership training positions to young white males. And then they say, well, but we have to develop new leadership. And I'm like, why only white males? Why are we training white males to take leadership positions in this day and age, when what we really need is for white males to learn how to take servant positions? And it's for the freedom of white males also, because I think that that's a form of enslavement, is that you're born a white male in this country. You have the pressure. You must be the leader. You must be successful. You must be smart. You must take care of everyone. You must do this. You must do that. But above all, you are the decider and knowledge of all things. Like,
I think
it makes you soft.
That's how institution is maintaining itself. It's using the white young man and family as an idol. It's an idol. It's a poster child. It's marketing. Straight marketing. God is not a part of that, of empowering one social location
only
over everything else. That just can't be proven in nature, that there's one animal that's over everything else. Even if we call the lion the king of the jungle, it still has issues with certain animals, and jungles are not everywhere.
Right.
So there's still balance, and institution is highly interested in us not asking questions, just accepting that, this is the God image that you should follow, and on into perpetuity.
And as someone who's in that population, white male, I'm not threatened by what you said, and I welcome that, because the only times that I have really grown in life is when I've humbled myself.
Word.
And I've allowed, and we said this in the jail a lot. Are you teachable? And white men are largely not teachable.
Right.
It's not to say everybody, but we are.
You're conditioned to be that way.
Right.
Exactly. And frankly, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, I see that. I'm not comfortable with that pressure of, all right, now I don't want that. Right. I don't want that now.
And that's part of the thing that I take from it when I hear Desmond Tutu's words, and when I look at what happens from actual practice, is the way that white men are oppressed
from that.
From that. Because if they want, I mean, even if it's something simple, like there's some men who are dads who are much better parents than the women. And they aren't allowed to stay at home because culturally that makes them seem weak. So, I mean, it takes choices away from men as well. And so it goes back to like, yes, you lose something, but you also gain freedom. You gain freedom to really determine who you are as an individual human in the community in which you reside. It gives you more opportunity to explore your spiritual gifts because you don't have to be the leader all the time.
Yeah, and I'm here to tell you that there are a lot of us, a lot of white men that are not threatened by this, and it's not a huge uphill battle. A lot of us feel we're not threatened by it. We're ready for change. We're ready for more of an open society. So,
you have to keep having the conversations with the white men who are threatened by it. So it's not about losing.
Right. Those are very difficult conversations. They don't end well.
Right.
Yeah, because those folks don't feel safe. And we're talking about psychology. We're not talking about moralism.
Right.
Right. So when you have a person that's in their amygdala and it's firing, then you have
to work through the emotions.
They have to feel safe with you first. It's just like Jesus would put some food in your belly first before the interaction, for the physical interaction, right?
I like that.
Psychological interaction, they have to be able to trust you more than they trust the fear that's
what they're
firing all through everything in their body.
So what's that expression you always tell me?
What?
About the care. I don't care what.
Oh, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
And so that to me also ties it back again to the pastoral and the prophetic going together.
Yeah.
The pastoral part would be developing the relationship so that you can build the trust, so that people can stick with you when you have to tell them a hard truth.
Yeah, they'll walk with you.
It's like,
I like that.
I'm telling you, Mr. White Man, that you suck because you're a white man, even though you had no choice in that. What I am saying is, I love you as a human being, and we have this relationship for this amount of time, and I'm looking at the bigger picture, and I see how this role that has been put on you is damaging people around you and damaging you. And let's just talk about that. Like, what are you getting out of this? And what would you get out of it more fair, and you could have these type of choices and interactions that weren't automatically given to you and told you have to be this way? Like, you can't cry. You can't talk about your emotions. You can't be weak in any way. I mean, that's a lot of pressure.
It's the same thing as when Jesus was taken up and made the offering of the world. Is that, hey, your social location as a white man, this is here for you. That's absolutely coming from the enemy. That's absolutely a spiritual attack when you can go and claim all of these things outside of God without any kind of process.
Without doing the spiritual work you're talking about.
How does fruit drop when there's been no seed and no plant? So we have to be suspicious of that. We have to let those ideas come forward, or we're gonna lose this country.
And the apocalypse actually means the unveiling. So
bingo.
So what we're in now is the unveiling of the fact that this system, the way that the world is set up, is not healthy for anyone. Not even the people who benefit from it. They think that they're doing well, but really, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, relationally, they're not doing well. They may be financially fine and have power and think that that's everything, but they're spiritually, emotionally, and all the other ways completely empty.
But isn't it funny how those that are in control have taught us to view the apocalypse and have taught us to fight against it, hope against it, and pray against it, when it means the unveiling? And if you look at the word revelation, it kind of sounds like reveal, which kind of is like
We're
uncovering something.
Yes. Yeah.
Which goes along with the meaning of apocalypse, which means that they really didn't want us to get to the point of our eyes opening. That's what, because see, there is an end of the world and worldliness. It's the end of that. It's not the end of the planet Earth. Like, we're not gonna get cracked in half and go away as a planet.
I mean, maybe
but the
not.
systems of this, of how we've dealt with humanity and you know the organisms on the planet, that has to end, and that is the world, not the earth.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely.